Hello everyone, today we're going to dive into something that honestly might bend your mind sideways and fold it like a paper crane. Picture this, a cold, sterile room. Clinical lighting. Cameras in every corner. And me, sitting on a metal chair in a lab coat, trying to look cool but mostly wondering what I just signed up for. There's a clipboard on the table, blank pages staring at me like they already know the outcome. That was the beginning of the strangest experiment I've ever been part of. One that proved, in the most bizarre way, that what you believe, deep in your core, can literally reshape your body. You probably won't survive this story with your current worldview intact. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I want to know where and when you're listening to this little slice of madness. Now, let's get comfortable, and let's get started today. It all started with a classified ad. No joke. Volunteers needed for a psychological and physiological research study. Must be in good health. No prior history of delusional thinking. I mean, that last line alone felt like bait. Naturally, I applied immediately. A week later, I was in a facility I now affectionately refer to as the Belief Dungeon. Technically, it was called the Monroe Research Institute, tucked away behind a row of pine trees off some lonely stretch of highway. But the vibe? Definitely Belief Dungeon. When I got there, I met Dr. Harold Monroe. He was the kind of man who wore a turtleneck under his lab coat and had too many pens clipped to his chest pocket. You could tell he hadn't slept in days, but his eyes were practically vibrating with excitement. "We're testing how belief systems affect measurable biological functions," he said, as if that explained anything. Now, I'm a curious person. Always have been. But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't at least 40% in it for the free meals and the stipend. The other 60% was just wanting to know what could possibly make someone that confident that belief could change your body. Strangely enough, the protocol was laughably minimal. They gave each of us a few hopeful lines. "This will unlock new healing pathways." Or, "Most people feel a shift right away." Then left us in an empty room. No stimulation. No drugs. Just silence and suggestion. Now, here's your first bit of human intelligence trivia. Did you know that just visualizing a workout can increase muscle strength over time? Yeah. People who merely imagined lifting weights for weeks actually showed strength gains compared to those who did nothing. That blew my mind. But here's where it gets weirder. After a few days of these suggestion sessions, I noticed something strange. My skin was clearer. My resting heart rate was lower. And I swear, this one made me question reality. I started needing less sleep. I felt more energized after 4 hours than I used to after 8. Was it placebo? Was it my mind trying to impress the lab techs? Or was it something deeper? One night, during a debriefing, I asked Monroe directly, "What exactly are you testing here?" He just smiled and said, "You'll see." If he had twirled a mustache, I would have walked out right then. Oh, and here's your off-topic fact for the day. Bananas are technically berries, but strawberries aren't. Think about that while I keep telling you how I might be turning into a Jedi through belief alone. Each of us in the study had slightly different suggestions, whispered into our sessions. Mine were about endurance. Another participant, Lucy, was told she'd develop faster healing. One guy, Craig, who looked like he'd been working construction for 20 years straight, was told he'd increase flexibility. I'll never forget walking into the common area and seeing Craig touch his toes with the elegance of a yoga instructor. I'm serious. The man could barely tie his shoes on day one. And that's when I started getting suspicious. Not of the experiment, but of myself. Was I really feeling better? Or had my brain just decided to manufacture symptoms to match the story? Now, there's an ongoing academic debate about the limits of placebo and psychosomatic response. Some researchers argue it's all just superficial. Placebos might affect how we feel, but not what we are. Others insist that belief can drive real physiological change, hormone production, immune response, maybe even gene expression. I didn't care about the debate. I wanted to see just how far this rabbit hole went. Dr. Monroe eventually introduced us to a strange little device, a biofeedback amplifier. I'm 90% sure it was just a modified lie detector, but it supposedly measured shifts in our bodies. Belief signature. Yeah, I rolled my eyes too. Until the numbers started to change based on nothing but the thoughts I was having. The tech would say, "Now believe something impossible." I'd close my eyes and imagine I could breathe underwater. The machine beeped. The monitor lit up. "Now believe you're completely ordinary," he'd say. The monitor dimmed. I don't know what the machine was measuring. I'm not even convinced they knew. But whatever it was, it made me start taking this whole thing a lot more seriously. And I wasn't the only one. One of the girls, Samira, started bringing a journal to each session. She said the more she wrote affirmations, like, "My body is repairing itself faster each day," the faster her sprained wrist healed. She'd injured it before the study, but her recovery was now accelerating faster than projected. Day by day, we were all transforming. Subtly. Quietly. Without medicine, without surgery, without even exercise in some cases. I'll admit, at night, I started whispering things to myself while falling asleep. "You don't need coffee anymore. Your metabolism is optimizing. You are built different." I felt like a walking TikTok trend. But the strangest thing? It worked. Dr. Monroe wasn't your average fringe scientist. He was a man possessed by an idea. He once told me, somewhere between a cough and a sip of black coffee that smelled suspiciously like old regrets, that he had been chasing this experiment for over 20 years. He'd studied psychology at Yale, then moved into neurobiology, and somewhere along the way fell into the deep rabbit hole of mind-body phenomena. Not the flashy kind with fire walking or telekinesis, but the quiet, subtle, persistent effects that beliefs have on blood pressure, heart rate, healing rates, what he liked to call belief biomarkers. "You know," he said one afternoon, staring out the window like a war general, "rats that think they're doomed die faster in mazes. Hope alters biology. And biology alters destiny." Then he bit into a protein bar like he just dropped a mic. I didn't have the heart to tell him the bar was expired. Monroe had dedicated the last decade of his life building the lab we were now living in. It wasn't flashy. In fact, it felt more like a converted high school science wing, peeling linoleum, humming fluorescent lights, a smell that hinted vaguely of vinegar and printer ink. But in those modest walls he packed sensors, thermal imaging systems, eye trackers, and of course, the infamous biofeedback amplifier. But the heart of it wasn't the gear, it was Monroe's obsession. He believed that belief itself was the missing piece in medicine. "We've sequenced the genome, mapped the brain, and we still don't understand why people with no treatment sometimes heal, and why people with all the resources sometimes don't." Human intelligence fact for today? The brain accounts for about 2% of your body weight but uses over 20% of your energy. That's a massive tax to pay for something that most of us used to worry about emails and rewatch sitcoms. But Monroe argued that if that energy was consciously directed, say, toward healing, it could be a literal internal medicine cabinet. He'd assembled a team, too, people who were just as quirky and just as oddly dedicated. There was Dr. Lena Kay, who had worked on attention bias in PTSD patients, and Max, a software engineer turned biometric researcher who looked like he lived off energy drinks and Wikipedia articles. Max had one of those faces that made you unsure if he was 20 or 45. He claimed his last job involved coding belief-driven AI, which I didn't believe but respected. One night, over a dinner of rehydrated pasta and lukewarm tea, Lena confided something strange. "We did an earlier pilot of this. One guy thought we injected him with a drug that speeds up reflexes. For 3 days he dodged everything we threw at him. Reflexes tested off the charts. Then we told him the truth. The next morning, he tripped on his shoelaces. Was it real? A fluke? We were beginning to see a pattern. Belief wasn't just a filter through which we interpreted the world. It was the software that could reprogram the hardware. Now let me throw in your oddball fact of the day, lobsters taste with their feet. Yeah. The same appendages they use to scuttle around the ocean floor are lined with chemoreceptors. Just imagine walking into a bakery and tasting croissants through your socks. You're welcome. Anyway, back to Monroe. He wasn't trying to create a cult or even prove magic was real. He wanted numbers. Evidence. The kind of data that would survive peer review and haunt medical journals for decades. His goal wasn't to convince us, it was to force the scientific community to confront what he called the inconvenient miracle of belief. Each morning, before breakfast, we were asked to write down what we believed about our bodies. Not what we wanted to believe. What we truly, undeniably, felt was true. I once wrote, "I think my stress is keeping my body tired." That same afternoon, my blood cortisol levels spiked higher than anyone else's. Coincidence? Maybe. But this kept happening. Lucy, the participant focused on healing, wrote, "I feel like I'm stronger than I was last week." Monroe had her perform grip strength tests every other day. She was right. Her strength was increasing at a rate that exceeded expected training gains. Except, she wasn't exercising. At all. There's an open academic debate right now about whether beliefs are epiphenomenal, just side effects of brain activity, or whether they have causal power. Most scientists lean toward the former. But Monroe? He was building his life around the latter. After our 6th session, Monroe gathered us all in the main room. He clicked on a projector, and up popped a slide with nothing but 2 words in bold. Test phase. We groaned. That usually meant we had to do another round of brain scan and chill. But Monroe clapped his hands, grinning like a dad about to pull a prank. "This phase is different," he said. "Now we give you false beliefs. And we'll see if your bodies follow anyway." I think we all laughed at first. I mean, wasn't this whole thing kind of false? But he was serious. Each of us would be randomly assigned a belief, introduced covertly, without our knowledge. Sometimes a whispered rumor. Sometimes a fake pamphlet left casually on a table. The belief might be positive, negative, or completely bizarre. Then they'd measure what happened. My fake belief? That I had a rare gene mutation that made me metabolize food 30% faster than normal. I found a fake research article about it in the lounge. I heard Max jokingly mention it during breakfast like it was trivia. "You know, people with the Delta X gene burn calories in their sleep," another participant said. "Wait, I think I read you have that." I played it cool. Shrugged. But a part of my brain went, "Maybe?" And that's when I noticed I wasn't gaining weight despite eating like a vending machine raccoon. My digestion improved. My food cravings dropped. My stomach felt cleaner somehow. I didn't want to believe the belief was responsible. But it was. You ever have that weird moment where your body starts behaving in ways you didn't ask for, and you're not sure if it's a superpower or a glitch in the Matrix? That was me on day 12. By then, the fake belief about my magical calorie-melting gene had sunk its claws in deep. I'd hear Max talking about it like it was gospel. Lena started casually handing me special meal plans, tailored to people with the Delta X gene, which, reminder, doesn't exist. But my brain was in full-blown buy-in mode. I started noticing food tasted differently. Cleaner. Brighter. And despite scarfing down second breakfasts like a rogue hobbit, I felt leaner, more energized, even a bit floaty. That's when Monroe called me in. He showed me the biometric chart like it was a page ripped out of a sci-fi novel. Resting metabolism? Up 18%. Fat oxidation? Elevated. Blood glucose? Stable, even after a bowl of cereal that could give a horse diabetes. "You believe you're changing," he said, leaning back in his office chair like a smug fortune cookie. "So your body is catching up." I wanted to argue. Blame the air conditioning or maybe a secret dose of celery extract in the water cooler. But deep down I knew. This wasn't a fluke. This was the power of the story I had been fed, and bought wholesale. Your brain is basically that one friend who has to finish a story, even if they have no clue how it ends. Uncertainty? Not allowed. It'll happily invent ghosts just to avoid saying, I don't know. And belief? Belief is just a story you've told yourself so many times, your body thinks it's truth. Speaking of weird truths, here's your off-topic fact. Octopuses have 3 hearts. And 2 of them stop beating when they swim. That's right. They basically risk a heart attack every time they feel athletic. I feel that spiritually. Anyway, the rest of the participants were having their own, let's say, adventures in belief. Craig, the guy who once mistook his hamstrings for decor, was now part of a belief cluster fed the idea that he was naturally gifted in rhythm. Every time he passed the rec room, he'd hear faint Afrobeat. The TV, accidentally, switched to dance competitions. Monroe had slipped him a fake email congratulating him for scoring high on some nonsense test called the Kinesthetic Tempo Profile. By week's end, Craig had built a playlist and was teaching himself to shuffle. I watched him one evening, earbuds in, tapping out beats on his thighs like he'd been born with a metronome in his ribs. You ever see a 6'2" drywall specialist moonwalk with actual confidence? It's both majestic and slightly illegal. Lucy, the healing-focused participant, was given the belief that she had inherited accelerated collagen regeneration. Again, totally fabricated. But she suddenly started recovering from her blisters faster than the control group. Monroe even sliced a paper cut on her hand, with her consent, I swear, and it healed nearly a day faster than baseline. But here's the thing, none of us knew these beliefs were implanted. Not officially. That was the genius. Monroe didn't tell us what was real and what wasn't. He simply changed the environment. Planted stories. Tweaked how people around us spoke. And our brains, being the little narrative junkies they are, did the rest. This is where things started getting philosophical. One night, Samira, queen of affirmations and former skeptic, sat next to me in the hallway. We were both watching the clock tick past midnight, unable to sleep. Do you think we're being brainwashed? She asked. I chuckled, mostly because she was sipping tea from a mug that said manifest that ish in curly gold font. Would it matter if the side effect was better health? She thought for a moment. I just wonder if believing something false can still make you more real. Honestly? I didn't have a comeback for that. Because she had a point. There's a messy academic fight happening right now about top-down processing in medicine, where the brain influences the body's sensory input and health feedback loops. Some researchers claim it's overhyped, placebo theater at best. Others insist it's the future of integrative medicine. But we weren't theorizing anymore. We were living in the experiment. And if I'm being honest, it was starting to feel like a cult, just one where instead of losing ourselves, we were finding more of ourselves. Then Monroe threw in a twist. Tomorrow, he said during group briefing, you'll be assigned new rooms. That might sound boring, but here's what he meant: new rooms, new suggestions, new surroundings. Fresh belief environments. Like hitting shuffle on your subconscious. Suddenly, I was sharing a room with Craig and had a bookshelf stocked with titles like The Athlete's Mind and Peak Reflex Conditioning. On my nightstand? A sticky note. Don't forget your post-workout protein. My mattress was slightly firmer, my slippers were orthopedic, and I swear the lighting was just bright enough to make me feel like doing push-ups. I didn't, but I felt like I could. This wasn't just about belief anymore, it was about immersion. Monroe was testing whether an entirely constructed reality could reshape not just thoughts, but physiology. Could your heartbeat shift, could your pupils dilate differently, just because the room whispered something about you that wasn't true? Spoiler, yes. Max showed me charts comparing skin conductivity from before and after the room switch. My body was responding as if I had exercised, even though I hadn't moved more than usual. My circadian rhythms started drifting forward, prepping for early workouts that never happened. And Craig? He was now meditating. On purpose. With incense. At this point, we were all low-key freaking out. No one said it out loud, but you could see it in our eyes, the creeping suspicion that belief wasn't just influencing behavior, it was rewriting identity. We had come in as test subjects. Now, We were becoming believers. The lab was quiet in that eerie, 3 a.m. sort of way where everything hums but nothing breathes. I was awake again, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I'd always been this version of me, or if belief had snuck in and repainted me like a house I forgot to lock. The room still smelled faintly of lavender and ambition. Craig was asleep, snoring gently under his motivational poster that read "You already are what you're becoming." Ugh. It was like living in a TED Talk. But the strange part was, it was working. Our whole group was beginning to shift, not just physically, but emotionally, even socially. Samira had become the camp therapist. Lucy was writing blog posts on intentional biology. And I started journaling. Which is basically a cry for help if you're me. That morning, Monroe gathered us in the lounge. The room buzzed with that electric anticipation you only get when you know something wild is about to drop. Sure enough, he hit us with a phrase that would haunt me. "Today, we begin the intervention of suggestion alone." We blinked. Weren't we already doing that? "No," he said, pacing like a TEDx speaker on his third espresso. "Up until now, you've had environmental cues, social reinforcement, and subtle coaching. But now we isolate it. Just belief. No props. No nudges. Just a single idea introduced directly." He handed us each a sealed envelope. "Inside is your belief. Don't open it until you're alone. Once you read it, you must act as though it's already true. No questions. For 72 hours. Mine felt heavier than paper should. I waited until I was alone in the meditation room, a space with soft lighting, too many pillows, and the unsettling silence of a room that knew your secrets. I opened it. "You no longer experience anxiety. Your nervous system has reset." That was it. No signature. No science speak. Just that. I laughed at first. Actually laughed out loud. Because if anyone was glued together with sheer anxious momentum, it was me. I worried about worrying. My default mood was undercaffeinated squirrel. But then I sat there, letting the words melt into my skull like a mantra. I repeated it slowly, softly. I let it rattle around in my bones. "You no longer experience anxiety. Your nervous system has reset." I didn't feel immediate peace. I didn't levitate. But something tilted. Something deep. Later that night, Craig accidentally knocked over his protein shake onto my bed. I didn't flinch. I didn't even clench my jaw. I just looked at him and said, "That's okay, man. We'll clean it up." He stared at me like I'd grown a third eye. And me? I was just as shocked. "Let's talk human wiring for a second. Your autonomic nervous system, the one running fight or flight mode on autopilot, can actually be swayed by conscious intent. Practices like breathwork and meditation prove it. But here's where it gets fascinating. Belief alone can bend that system. And science is still catching up to how and why. Because over the next 3 days, I didn't feel anxious once. Not when I was late to Monroe's biometrics session. Not when I accidentally deleted my digital journal. Not even when I found a spider in my shoe, which, under normal circumstances, would have sent me directly into interpretive dance mode. I wasn't numb, I just felt calm. "Samira's card? Your blood is now optimized for endurance." She went on a 5-mile run without training. Didn't break a sweat. "Lucy's? Your immune system has elevated to protect you." She developed a mild cold, and it vanished in 12 hours. Even the researchers were startled. And now for your off-topic fact. Sea cucumbers can eject their internal organs as a defense mechanism, then regrow them. Yep. When under stress, they basically puke up their guts and say, "You deal with it." And their bodies just shrug and rebuild. The natural world is wild. Anyway, back to us, the increasingly confused lab rats in the psychological Disneyland. After our 3-day solo belief immersion, we reconvened. Monroe didn't ask how we felt. He asked what we noticed. Which is so quintessentially, Monroe, it hurts. We shared our stories, each more surreal than the last. Lena showed us hormone-level graphs that had shifted significantly across the group, and Monroe smiled that terrifyingly satisfied smile of someone watching the pieces click. "You're all responding," he said. "Not because I gave you drugs? Not because of tech. But because we introduced a belief you allowed to take root." He paused, then added, "And now, we're going to challenge it." This was where things turned. We were told to disbelieve what we had just experienced. For the next 72 hours, we were to repeat a counter-belief. Mine was, "Your nervous system is unreliable. It betrays you frequently." Ugh! My chest tightened just reading it. And guess what? Within a day, I felt twitchy again. I started waking up in the middle of the night. I second-guessed my choices. I caught myself clenching my fists while brushing my teeth. It was like someone had reinstalled the software of stress. Which brings us to the academic elephant in the room. How much of the placebo effect is reversible? If belief heals, can disbelief harm? There's a branch of research called nocebo studies, where negative expectations produce negative outcomes. A sugar pill causing headaches, for instance, simply because someone was told it might. It's the evil twin of placebo, and we were living it. Lucy reported slower healing during her counter-belief phase. Craig's flexibility dropped. Samira felt tired and demotivated. Even her journal entries became darker, shorter, less hopeful. Monroe, of course, was thrilled. "It's proof," he said. "That belief is a two-way switch. And now we know how to flip it." But I was shaken. Because this wasn't just theory anymore. This was control. Raw, untethered influence over biology using nothing but suggestion. I started wondering, if someone else can write a belief into you, what happens when you stop being the author? One evening I sat with Max in the lounge. He was fiddling with the biofeedback monitor, adjusting sensors and chewing on a granola bar like it had personally offended him. "This stuff's bigger than psychology," he said. "We're not hacking habits, we're hacking identity." He paused, then added with a smirk, "Like how much of you is just bad code waiting for an update?" I didn't have an answer. But I knew I was scared. Because for the first time, I realized belief wasn't just a thing you have. It's a thing that has you. After that reverse belief trial, the air in the facility changed. We weren't just volunteers anymore, we were unstable variables. Everyone walked a little slower. Eye contact was shorter. Conversations had lost their sparkle. It was like the entire place had developed seasonal depression without the seasons. I wasn't immune either. The phrase, "Your nervous system is unreliable," echoed in my skull like a passive-aggressive ringtone. I couldn't shake it. I'd hear the fridge hum and wonder if it was mocking me. My heart would skip a beat, and instead of moving on, I'd spiral. Was that a sign? Was I reverting? Was the reset fake all along? Monroe noticed, of course. He always did. He called it cognitive slippage, that space where you no longer trust your own experience because it's been tampered with. It's a psychological cousin of gaslighting, but internal. When the person undermining your truth is you. Belief is fragile, he told us in the next debrief. Until it's not. Right now, you're in the cocoon stage, gooey, vulnerable, and mostly annoyed. But you'll come through. I wanted to punch him in his metaphor. Instead, I took a walk around the facility, outside this time, where the cold air didn't care about my thoughts. The trees didn't judge. The sky didn't suggest anything. It just was. Oddly comforting. Anyway, let me serve your random science snack. The tongue isn't divided into neat taste zones like textbooks say. There are no sweet spots or bitter patches. Every part of your tongue can detect every taste. The idea of a taste map was based on a mistranslation that somehow survived decades of education. Belief, it turns out, can outlive accuracy. So yeah, maybe the lies we believe about ourselves are just mistranslations that never got corrected. Back inside, Monroe announced the next phase, the belief rebuild. We've shown how belief constructs and deconstructs physical response. Now we're going to teach you to consciously choose belief. This wasn't about manipulation anymore, it was about authorship. We were given tools, language prompts, breathwork exercises, memory recall techniques. Samira called it spiritual CrossFit. And honestly, she wasn't wrong. It felt like mental squats at 6 a.m. Monroe handed out worksheets titled Cognitive Architecture Templates. Just the phrase made me want to fail on purpose. But the idea was elegant: build a belief from scratch using the 5 senses, memory, and identity cues. Anchor it to something personal. So I picked calm. I wrote, I am inherently calm, even in uncertainty. Step 1, Visual Anchor. I imagine myself floating in a lake at sunset. Still water. Warm light. No emails. Step 2, Sensory Anchor. I recalled the exact scent of fresh laundry, my mom's, from when I was a kid. Safe. Uncomplicated. Step 3, Memory Overlay. I layered that image over a past moment when I had panicked, my first college presentation. Then I rewrote it in my mind, watching myself give the talk calmly. I did this for 3 days. And something started to shift. The brain often cannot distinguish between real memory and vividly imagined events. That's why false memories are so powerful, and why imagination, if used skillfully, can replace trauma or rewrite emotional reactions. On day 4, Monroe measured my cortisol levels after I intentionally stressed myself out, by watching a compilation of people being interviewed on live TV and forgetting basic facts. If you ever want your soul to physically cringe, try it. But my cortisol stayed low. Lower than baseline. It's holding, he said. You've stabilized the belief. And that's when I began to believe in belief. Not in a woo-woo, walk on hot coals kind of way, but in a grounded, biological way. Like, my brain is programmable, and I finally found the coding manual. Others were going through the same metamorphosis. Lucy, who once believed she was fragile, rewrote her story as, I heal quickly because I care for my body. And guess what? Her sleep improved. She developed better posture. Her gut issues, which had plagued her for years, mysteriously calmed. Craig rebuilt his identity around the phrase, my body adapts to what I ask of it. He started trying new things daily, cold showers, new foods, stretching routines. He looked taller. Not like he physically grew, but like he occupied space differently. This is where the experiment took its final form. We weren't test subjects anymore. We were co-researchers. And Monroe, in his usual cryptic way, handed us our final instruction. Create your signature belief. This would be our thesis, our North Star. A single sentence that, if lived fully, would improve our biology, psychology, and behavior. We had 3 days to build it. And then we'd test it. No pressure. So I paced the halls like a monk with caffeine. I journaled like a teenager in the 2000s. I rewrote, revised, deleted, doubted. Eventually, I wrote, I am safe in my own mind, and my body follows peace. Simple. True-ish. Aspirational without sounding like something you'd find stitched on a pillow. And the moment I read it out loud, something clicked. Not like fireworks. More like a click in a lock. Quiet. But irreversible. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm. Not from anxiety. Just awake. My body wasn't buzzing. My brain wasn't running 1,000 tabs like a broken browser. I lay there, breathing in the stillness, repeating the phrase I'd crafted the night before. I am safe in my own mind, and my body follows peace. It felt solid now, like a truth that had always been there, just buried under all the noise and scrolling and unpaid bills. And the best part? My body agreed. I sat up without the usual tension behind my eyes. No tightness in my chest. Just breath. Just clarity. Monroe met with each of us individually that day, and when it was my turn, he didn't say anything at first. Just studied me. Then he asked, Do you feel like a different person? I thought about it. I feel like the same person, I said slowly. But now I believe I'm not broken. He nodded, writing something down in that eternal notebook of his. Good, he said. Now we see what your body says. What followed was the most invasive round of testing yet. Full blood panels. Hormonal assays. Heart rate variability measured during both stress and rest. A muscle tension scan. Even voice modulation analytics. Yeah, apparently they can measure confidence and calm through speech patterns now. We really are living in a Black Mirror episode. My results came back with subtle but measurable changes: lower cortisol, improved HRV, better sleep markers, and elevated oxytocin levels, which made me suspicious until Monroe pointed out that believing you're safe stimulates the same hormonal patterns as hugging a loved one. I was basically hugging myself from the inside out. Cozy. Across the hall, Samira was glowing. She'd built her belief around abundance. There is always more energy in me than I think. And she was thriving. Her skin looked clearer. Her laugh was louder. She walked like the hallway belonged to her. Craig's belief was unexpectedly poetic. I am built for change. He started journaling haikus, which none of us saw coming. One night he read one out loud. Stretch like morning light. I forget my old limits. Until they forget. We clapped. It was weird. It was beautiful. It was effective. Then Monroe did the unthinkable. He showed us the footage. Every session we'd been in. Every test. Every hallway walk. We were surveillance gold mines. Some of it was mundane, some hilarious. Lucy had apparently danced in the break room at least twice a week, and some kind of magical. Because when we watched ourselves before our beliefs were implanted versus after, it was like comparing two versions of the same person, one dull, jittery, hesitant, and the other more upright, more expressive, even more colorful somehow. And this is where Monroe delivered the mic drop. These were not just physical changes, he said. They were identity shifts. We changed the narrative, and your body rewrote the script. Cue the off-topic fact. Did you know that giraffes have no vocal cords? They communicate through low-frequency humming too deep for human ears. So even if it seems like they're silent, they're still talking. Just not to us. Kind of like our bodies, huh? Always speaking in a language we often don't bother to learn. Monroe handed each of us a profile summary, what he called our biometric stories. It contained our data from day one to now, framed through the lens of belief adoption. There were charts, trend lines, even word clouds from our journaling entries. And mine, well, mine looked like a redemption arc. My stress metrics dipped. My self-reported mood improved. But the real kicker? My immune markers had strengthened. White blood cell counts normalized. Inflammation dropped. No drugs. No diets. Just story. But Monroe wasn't done. He sat us down in a circle, classic cult style, only we had snacks, and told us the original purpose of the experiment. The real one. Most studies measure belief effects over years, he said. I wanted to see what happened in weeks. And I didn't want to ask what people believed. I wanted to give them beliefs. Plant them. Test them. Reverse them. And let them grow new ones by choice. His goal wasn't healing. It wasn't manipulation. It was agency. He pointed at his whiteboard, where he'd scribbled 3 phrases. 1. Belief precedes biology. 2. Biology reflects story. 3. Story can be edited. He let the silence hang like incense. That's when Samira, never one to sit with stillness, broke the silence. So what now? We go back to the world and try to stay enlightened while the Wi-Fi's down and bills are due? Monroe smiled. No. You go back and rewrite. He handed us cards with a final prompt. What's the belief you refuse to let go of? That question haunted me. It still does. Because belief isn't just a thought you like. It's a thought that anchors you. You hold it tight when the world spins. You whisper it when the lights are off. You bleed it when you're scared. I wrote mine in pen. Peace is native to me, not earned. The others wrote theirs too. We didn't share all of them. Some were private. Sacred. Hard-earned. But we folded those cards and sealed them in envelopes. Not for Monroe. For ourselves. Because when you know your story can change your body, you start choosing every word like it matters. Because it does. 3 days after sealing our final belief cards, we were told the experiment was, officially, over. Which, of course, was Monroe speak for. The real experiment is about to begin. We gathered in the lounge that morning, our final group session, allegedly. The same cheap carpet, same flickering light in the corner, same mildly stale coffee smell lingering like a ghost from last week's bad decisions. Monroe stood at the front, looking somehow both exhausted and elated, like a man who had survived a hurricane by riding it like a surfboard. He was holding a clipboard, but for once, he didn't glance at it. He looked directly at us. "You're going home today," he said. "Back to your lives, routines, obligations. But you're leaving with a dangerous tool." He paused dramatically. The man loved his pauses. "You now know belief isn't an accessory, it's the operating system. And once you've hacked the system, you can never pretend it's just a screen-saver again." We waited for a dramatic mic drop. Instead, he just sipped his coffee and gestured toward the door. "You're free." And just like that, we were unceremoniously released. Our phones were returned. Our luggage, dusty from storage, wheeled out. I stood in the parking lot for a full 5 minutes, staring at the rental car they'd assigned me, wondering if my life would recognize me when I returned. The drive home was surreal. Traffic felt like a test. I watched my reactions like a therapist with a stopwatch. Someone cut me off, and instead of swearing, I just blinked. Peace is native to me, not earned. I whispered it out loud. Like a code. Like armor. And it held. Here's your human intelligence fact. Mirror neurons in your brain fire not only when you perform an action, but when you observe someone else doing it. That's why watching someone yawn makes you want to yawn. But here's the kicker. Some studies show that these same neurons can trigger emotional simulations. You can try on someone else's emotional state. Belief, it seems, can be contagious. Which brings me to the weirdest part of re-entry. Everyone around me seemed different. Slower. More anxious. Less certain. But of course, they hadn't been in the belief dungeon. My roommate Kyle greeted me with a, "You good, man?" As if I'd just returned from a silent retreat or possibly jail. "I'm better than good," I said. "I'm recalibrated." He blinked. "Do you need to sit down?" I didn't. For the first time in years, my mind didn't feel like it was clawing at the walls of my skull. I unpacked my bag in silence, set my final belief card on my desk, and just existed. No music. No distractions. Just breath and presence. Until, of course, life decided to throw a wrench. 2 days later, I lost my job. Budget cuts. Company restructuring. The usual buzzwords they use when they're too chicken to just say, "You're out." The old me would have spiraled into anxiety, insomnia, frantic job bored scrolling at 3 a.m. But this version? I exhaled. I sat down, opened my notebook, and wrote. I am safe in my own mind. I am built for change. Peace is native to me. I know, it sounds like self-help soup. But it worked. My heart rate stayed steady. My appetite stayed normal. I even slept that night. It wasn't denial. It was choice. Oh, and here's your off-topic oddity. Sloths can hold their breath longer than dolphins. I know. Wild. Dolphins, 10 minutes. Sloths, up to 40. That's what belief in extreme chilling looks like. Anyway, back to the chaos. With no job to anchor my days, I leaned into routine. Morning breath work. Journaling. Gentle movement. Reading my belief card like it was scripture. But I also noticed something unexpected. People around me were responding differently. Cal started asking what I was doing in the mornings. My sister called and said, "You sound like weirdly grounded. Are you okay?" Even my dog seemed calmer. Less leash tugging, more eye contact. It was as if my internal peace was leaking into the room. This is when I realized beliefs aren't personal. They radiate. And that terrified me. Because if I had walked around for years believing I was unstable, anxious, always 5 minutes from breakdown, what had I been broadcasting? What waves had I been sending into every room I entered? There's a quiet, creeping debate in neuroscience about interpersonal neurobiology, the idea that our nervous systems co-regulate. That your emotional state doesn't just affect you, it affects everyone near you. The science is yum. But the theory? It made me look at every interaction differently. At a cafe one morning, the barista messed up my drink. She looked panicked, ready for a complaint. Instead, I smiled. No stress. Make it how you like. She blinked. Really? Really? A week later, I saw her again. She made my drink before I even ordered. You're the chill one, she said. And that's when it hit me. I wasn't acting anymore. The belief had fused. I wasn't trying to be peaceful. I just was. Now I know what you're thinking. Cool story, bro. But what happens when life really tests you? And oh, it did. A month post-study, I got a call from Monroe. He sounded tired. Different. The man who had radiated cryptic wisdom now sounded like he was barely holding his shape. They shut us down, he said. What? The board. The funding partners. They saw the early data and panicked. Said it was too unstable. Too open-ended. Not replicable. I sat in silence. He added, I wanted to warn you. They might try to discredit the whole study. My stomach dropped. But, he said, voice soft now, you carry the only data that matters. What do you mean? You. Your body. Your life. That's the proof now. Then he hung up. I haven't heard from him since. Maybe he went underground. Maybe he took his data and disappeared into the academic shadows. All I know is, I'm still here. Still anchored. Still choosing peace. And now I knew, beyond theory, beyond charts, beyond Monroe, that belief had changed my body. And maybe, just maybe, it could change the world. The news about Monroe's lab being shut down didn't hit me right away. At first, it just felt like a bad business decision made by people who never experienced the thing they were afraid of. But 2 days later, when I saw a headline online, Controversial Study on Belief-Based Healing Faces Ethics Probe, it all became painfully real. They weren't just erasing the funding. They were erasing us. The article painted Monroe as a rogue psychologist with a God complex, manipulating vulnerable volunteers with fake science and pseudotherapy. No mention of results. No mention of informed consent, of which we had plenty. No mention of the fact that our bodies were better, stronger, calmer, clearer. They framed it like we were brainwashed. Not empowered. I scrolled through the comments like an idiot, which is never a good idea. Belief isn't medicine. This is dangerous. Next they'll tell us to wish cancer away. That last one stayed with me, not because it was offensive, but because it revealed the fear. People don't hate ideas like this because they're false. They hate them because they might be true. And apparently science wasn't ready to hurt for this. Still, I had a life to live. And life, true to form, wasn't waiting for my belief-powered enlightenment to settle in. One morning, I woke up to a call from my dad. My Aunt Marcia had fallen. Hip fracture. Surgery scheduled. I offered to fly out immediately, but he said, no rush. She's stable. Just scared. That part hit me. Not the injury. The fear. I knew that fear intimately. That helpless kind of spiraling where your body feels like a trap and your mind won't stop showing you the worst slides in the projector reel. So I packed a bag and went anyway. At the hospital, I found her in a shared room, half asleep, half listening to the hum of machines. She opened her eyes and smiled weakly. Look who it is. Thought you'd gone off to join a monk cult. Almost, I said. Turns out monks eat too early. She laughed, then winced. Don't make me laugh. It pulls. I sat by her and just talked. Nothing fancy. No manifestos. No Monroe quotes. But something in me had changed. My tone. My breath. My presence. And she felt it. Why do I feel better when you're here? She asked after a while. I smiled. Maybe I believe in your healing more than you do. She closed her eyes. Then keep believing. Just like we reduce belief into just mindset. But it's probably far more than that. I stayed for a week. During that time, I started sharing bits of what I'd learned. Not preachy. Just conversational. I helped her create her own belief card. She chose, my body repairs itself while I rest, and I trust that. I taped it to her nightstand. Nurses started noticing her progress. She's alert. She's sleeping better. Vitals are steady. Coincidence? Maybe. But her smile said otherwise. Back home, I got a text from Samira. It had been weeks since our last contact. It was a photo, her, standing in front of a yoga studio with a sign that read Belief in Motion, opening soon. The caption: Come visit. First class is free. Second class is truth. I laughed so hard I scared Kyle's cat off the windowsill. Then another message came in, Lucy this time. She'd published a blog post titled The Placebo Was Never Fake. It was going viral. Quietly, but virally. We were all becoming echoes of the lab. And that's when it hit me, maybe Monroe knew he couldn't preserve the Institute forever. Maybe he knew the experiment's power wasn't in the building. It was in the seeds. He planted them in us. And now we were pollinating the world. I started journaling differently after that. Less about checking boxes and more about noticing what beliefs I was accidentally holding on to. Like, I'll always be behind. I need to prove myself constantly. Happiness has to be earned. Those had been running in my background code for years. And now I could see them. That was half the battle. Because here's the thing, beliefs aren't just added. They're replaced. You don't slap a new one on top of the old like wallpaper. You strip it, clean it, sand it down. Then you rebuild. There's an emerging branch of psychology called memory reconsolidation. It suggests that when we revisit an emotional memory, we can actually edit it before it gets stored again. It's like opening a save file in a video game and changing the outcome. If we do it right, the brain stores the new version as reality. And belief? Belief is just a memory of what we've decided is true. So I began editing. Old panic memories? I rewrote them with calm narration. Past failures? I rewatched them through the eyes of someone learning. Each time, I ended the visualization with my belief card phrase. Peace is native to me, not earned. And slowly, the edit stuck. I didn't just think differently. I remembered differently. One night, I looked at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. Nothing mystical. Just me. Tired. Unshaven. Shirt from 2 days ago. But I smiled. Because for the first time, I believed what I saw. Not the clothes or skin or tired eyes. But the calm. The strength. The quiet rewrite of someone who'd chosen a different script. I believed in him. And that changed everything. The belief started living in my bones. That's the only way I can explain it. It wasn't a mantra anymore, it was marrow. The phrase didn't need repetition. It echoed by itself, quietly, like a melody you can't unhear. Peace is native to me, not earned. I began to notice something strange. The world hadn't changed, but it felt different. I still hit red lights. My bank account still judged me. People still forgot to text back. But my response to all of it had softened. Not in a weak, float away on a cloud kind of way, but in a way that said, yes, this is annoying. And yes, I'm still okay. One afternoon, standing in line at the DMV, basically the spiritual opposite of inner peace, I saw a woman arguing with a clerk over paperwork. Her voice was sharp, her body tense, vibrating with frustration. Everyone else in line either looked away or quietly judged. But something made me step forward. I tapped her shoulder. She turned, eyes red and wild, ready to fight. Hey, I said gently. Do you want to switch places? You look like you've had a long day. She blinked. Then blinked again. Her eyes softened, her shoulders fell, and she whispered, Thank you? It wasn't about me being nice. It was about me being anchored. And that kind of calm is disarming. Let me tell you something cool. People with high vagal tone, that stress-soothing switch in your nervous system, tend to bounce back faster and connect deeper. And the best part? It's not fixed. Simple habits like deep breathing and even just believing things can get better actually train your body to handle life with more grace. There's even early evidence suggesting that belief in safety can stimulate vagal response. Which means the story you tell yourself about your world directly affects how your body handles it. I thought about that a lot during the weeks that followed. How many of us are operating on stories we never wrote? I started keeping a second journal. Not about goals or gratitude or dreams. Just beliefs. 1 page per lie I'd carry for too long. I'm only lovable when I'm useful. If I slow down, I'll fall behind. If people saw the real me, they'd leave. And across from each one, I wrote the rewrite. I'm lovable because I exist. Slowing down is how I hear the truth. The real me is worth staying for. Not affirmations. Declarations. And they started to take. Now, here's your off-topic fact of the day. Sharks existed before trees. Yup. Sharks have been swimming around this planet for over 400 million years, while trees only showed up about 350 million years ago. Evolution's plot twists are wild. Back to belief. One night I went to a friend's birthday party, first big social event since the study. Pre-belief me would have stood near the chips, anxiously overanalyzing every conversation, pretending to check my phone every 6 minutes. But believe me? I sat in the middle of a group I barely knew, asked weird questions like, if your emotions were weather, what would they be tonight? And actually enjoyed myself. Later, a girl I didn't know said, you have really calming energy. Like weirdly calming. I smiled. I've been working on it. That was the first time I admitted out loud that belief was something you could train, not just something you had. And the truth is, most of us are training beliefs all the time, we just don't realize it. Every time we say, I'm not good at relationships, we're training the belief. Every time we flinch when someone praises us, we're reinforcing the belief that we don't deserve love. Every eye roll, every just my luck, every apology for existing, it's all mental push-ups in the gym of self-sabotage. But if you can train that, you can retrain it. Monroe used to say, beliefs are just long-term conversations you've stopped questioning. And that stuck with me. Because when you start listening to those conversations, really listening, you realize how many of them aren't yours. They belong to parents, exes, school bullies, algorithms, capitalism, religion, trauma. But not you. The real you? You're still under there, waiting for a better story. And it wasn't just me anymore. I started hearing from the others. We had an unspoken agreement, no social media posts, no public declarations about the experiment. But we checked in. Quietly. Samira's yoga studio was a success. People came in for stretching, left with belief cards. Craig had started a podcast called Built for Change. First episode was just him, talking about how his first belief was that his body couldn't keep up, and how that belief belonged to a gym teacher from 7th grade. Lucy had gone full throttle into research. She was privately collaborating with a few open-minded academics, collecting stories from volunteers, trying to build a database of lived belief shift experiences. She texted me one night. We're not anomalies. We're evidence. It gave me chills. Because what happens when enough people realize their lives aren't defined by fate or failure, but by story? What happens when we realize that biology isn't fixed, but responsive? And more than that, what happens when we stop handing our beliefs over to everyone else? Because I'll tell you something, once you reclaim authorship, everything changes. You start speaking differently. You pause before reacting. You look at setbacks and ask, What belief is this inviting me to challenge? You don't become perfect. You become present. And presence is its own kind of miracle. I wish I could say the world got easier after that. It didn't. Rent still sucks. Emails still pile up. Grief still happens. In fact, a friend of mine passed away 2 months after the study, unexpected, heartbreaking. But when I sat in the quiet afterward, shaking, breath shallow, I remembered my belief. Peace is native to me, not earned. And slowly I returned to breath. Returned to now. Because peace isn't the absence of pain. It's the refusal to believe that pain gets the last word. The truth is, life doesn't slow down after you've had a breakthrough. It doesn't stop throwing curveballs or unexpected twists. But what I learned was that you don't need the world to change in order to feel different. You just need to change the lens through which you see it. A few weeks after my friend's passing, I found myself staring at the same old problems. Work was still a chaotic mess. Bills still had to be paid. And sure, some days I wanted to crawl into bed and disappear. But I also found that I could navigate it all with a steadier hand. It's strange, isn't it? How belief doesn't fix everything. It doesn't erase the tough stuff. But it gives you the space to sit with it without breaking. When you've been through something transformative, whether it's a study or a life-changing experience, you can't go back to the person you were. That's not how it works. You can't unsee things you've seen, and you can't unfeel things that have cracked you open. But you can grow from them. You can write a new story. And in that story, you're not at the mercy of life's circumstances. You're at the helm. You get to decide what happens next. Now, I still face days when my old patterns try to creep in. When I feel that familiar knot in my chest, or when doubt starts whispering that I'm not doing enough. But the difference now is that I know I can rewrite that script. I can question the beliefs that come up. I can stop myself mid-sentence and ask, is this really true? Because that's the thing about beliefs. They're like old software that runs in the background, often without us even knowing. They're the little programs that dictate how we see ourselves and the world around us. But when you learn to look at them, when you take the time to step back and question them, they lose their power over you. And for me, that was the most profound gift the study gave me. When I returned to my job, after the heartbreak, after the grief, I started seeing it differently. I no longer carried the weight of always needing to be perfect or always needing to be right. I started focusing on presence. The work still piled up, but it didn't consume me anymore. I learned to hold space for both the good and the bad without getting swallowed whole by either one. And when I looked at the people around me, I saw how much their beliefs shaped their realities. I saw friends who carried beliefs like heavy stones, beliefs that they couldn't change, that they weren't enough, that they had no control over their lives. But I also saw how, little by little, people were starting to notice. They'd ask me about what had changed, how I was handling everything with such calmness. I didn't have a quick fix to offer. I didn't hand out belief cards or try to push anyone into rewriting their lives. But I shared what I'd learned, that you can't change the world by waiting for it to change. You change it by changing how you respond to it. By changing how you believe in yourself, even when the world says otherwise. So, when the next challenge came, when the next loss happened, I wasn't shaken the way I used to be. I allowed myself to grieve, to feel, to be angry and sad and frustrated. But I also knew that in the midst of that, I could choose peace. I could choose how I responded to that grief. I could choose who I wanted to be in the face of pain. I began to realize that every challenge, every heartache, every obstacle that life throws at you is an opportunity to test what you believe. Do you believe you're a victim of circumstance? Do you believe that things are always going to be difficult? Or do you believe that you have the power to choose your response? Do you believe that peace can be your anchor, even when the storm rages? The storm didn't go away. It never does. Life is messy, unpredictable, and full of hard moments. But I realized that peace isn't something that happens when everything is perfect. Peace is the choice you make in the middle of the mess. Now, I'm not here to tell you that this journey is some magical cure. It's not. The study, Monroe, the belief cards, none of it is a fix for everything. But it is a reminder that we have more control over our lives than we give ourselves credit for. We are not simply at the mercy of what happens to us. We have the power to choose how we respond. And that's where the real magic happens. One night I sat down to write in my journal. I wrote about everything I'd learned, about beliefs, about rewriting my story, about the power of peace. But I also wrote about the things I hadn't yet figured out. The things that still felt messy and unresolved. The things that hurt. But even in the middle of all that uncertainty, I ended the entry with a single sentence. I trust myself to figure it out. And that's the thing, isn't it? No matter where life takes you, no matter how much you've changed or how much you've lost, if you can trust yourself, if you can believe in your own ability to navigate whatever comes next, then you're already ahead of the game. Because at the end of the day, it's not the world that needs to change. It's you. It's funny how, when you start looking for changes, you find them everywhere. You start noticing how people talk, how they move through the world. You begin to understand that all of us are writing stories every single day, even if we're not fully aware of it. And just like that, I began noticing shifts in people around me. One afternoon, I was at the local coffee shop, where I seemed to live at least half of my life, and I overheard a conversation at the next table. A woman was talking to her friend, complaining about her job, her finances, her relationship. Same old script that so many of us play on repeat. But what caught my attention was her phrase. I just don't think I'm cut out for anything else. I'm not cut out for anything else. It was a simple phrase, but one that hung in the air, like a weight she didn't even realize she was carrying. Her voice was defeated, and she wasn't saying it for anyone's benefit. It was a belief she had internalized so deeply that it had become her truth. I couldn't help but think back to the study. I thought about the work we'd done to rewrite beliefs. About how it wasn't enough to simply acknowledge that a belief existed, you had to challenge it. You had to look it in the face and say, "Is this really true?" I thought about telling her, "You're not stuck. You can rewrite your story." But I didn't. I didn't want to be that person, the unsolicited guru at the coffee shop. But I carried her words with me, and I began wondering, how many people are walking around with these unconscious scripts that are limiting their potential? How many of us are walking around unaware of the beliefs we've inherited? You see, beliefs don't just shape how we see the world. They shape how we move through it. This is where it gets tricky. We want to think of beliefs as these abstract concepts, like vague ideas floating around our heads, but they're not just abstract. They're practical. They determine what you believe you can achieve, who you think you can love, how you think the world will treat you. They're the invisible guidelines that determine your behavior. And the most dangerous ones are the ones you don't even know are there. It took me a while to truly understand that. In the beginning, I thought I was just doing some mental gymnastics, trying to feel better about my job or life or whatever. But it wasn't just about feeling better. It was about shifting, changing the way I perceived everything, changing how I responded to everything. The moment you realize that your beliefs can shape your life, you start seeing the world differently. I became aware of how often I tell myself stories without even questioning them. I can't do that. That's not for me. I'll never get ahead. And the thing is, you don't need to do anything drastic to start changing those beliefs. You just need to stop letting them dictate your reality. The first step is noticing them. That was my biggest takeaway from the experiment, the simple, powerful realization that awareness is the key. You can't change something if you don't know it's there. That's why the first few days after I left the lab were both exhilarating and exhausting. I was hyper-aware of every thought, every belief I carried, and it felt like I was staring at my entire mental archive at once. Old stories I'd forgotten. New stories I was ready to embrace. But over time, I started to fall into a rhythm. A belief I had about myself wasn't so much a truth anymore, it was just a pattern. And patterns can be changed. It's funny. When you change your beliefs, the world starts to seem different, too. The world itself hasn't changed, but the way you move through it changes everything. One of the best parts of my day now is sitting in silence and reflecting on how far I've come. Not in a, "Look at me, I'm amazing kind of way, but in a wow, I was carrying around so much unnecessary weight kind of way. The weight of beliefs that didn't serve me. Your brain is a pattern machine. Feed it repetition, and it builds a habit. Feed it intention, and it builds a life. The real power? You can rewire those loops. Shift the pattern, and eventually, the new belief becomes who you are, even on autopilot. And the coolest part? You don't need to change everything overnight. You don't need to overhaul your entire personality, or wipe your slate clean of all negativity. It's a gradual process. You simply have to start. At first, it can feel awkward. Like you're trying on new shoes, but you're not sure if they'll fit. But with time, the new beliefs, the ones that align with peace, with possibility, with growth, become as comfortable as your old ones. A few months after I returned from the study, I ran into Kyle again. I hadn't seen him much since I'd started working on myself, but one night, we met for a drink. Man, he said after a few beers, you've really changed. Like you've really changed. You're not the same person. I smiled. Maybe. But I'm still me. He looked confused. What do you mean? I explained it to him as best I could, using what I'd learned. The old me thought I had to hustle, prove myself all the time, try to control everything. But now, I'm just here. I trust that things are happening in their own time, and I don't have to fight against it. Kyle thought about that for a minute. You know, that sounds nice. But I don't think I could do that. I've got too much going on. I need to fix everything before I can be calm. I laughed, remembering the me from before. That's the trap. You're already enough. You don't have to fix anything. He shook his head. Man, I don't know. That sounds like a lot of belief work. Maybe when I get around to it. And that's the thing, isn't it? Some people will get it. Others won't. Some will choose to rewrite their story, and others will stick with the one they know, for better or for worse. But I realized that my role wasn't to force it on anyone. My role was just to live my story, fully and unapologetically, and let it speak for itself. Because in the end, belief isn't about convincing others. It's about showing up for yourself. And that, more than anything, is the most powerful thing you can do. The more I moved through the world with my new awareness of beliefs, the more I realized how much of our lives are shaped by stories we never question. We believe them because they're comfortable. Because they'd been with us for so long that we don't even notice them anymore. They become our truths, even if they're limiting or false. I began to understand that a belief is like a doorway. You can either step through it, or you can stay behind it. You can stay locked in a room where you keep repeating the same patterns, or you can walk through that door and experience something different. The choice is always yours. The best part? You don't even need to see the whole path. You just need to take one step. And once you take that step, you realize how much further you've come than you thought you could. A few weeks ago, I was back at that same coffee shop where I'd overheard the woman's conversation about not being cut out for anything else. I had a conversation with my own self, sitting at that table with a coffee in front of me. The only difference was that this time, I wasn't caught in the spiral of doubt. I wasn't questioning everything I'd done. I wasn't second-guessing my ability to find meaning in what I was doing. Instead, I found a quiet certainty. It was there, sitting next to a quiet, half-finished cappuccino, that I realized, this isn't about a single breakthrough. It's about how you continue, even when everything isn't perfect, even when life doesn't stop challenging you. The experiment didn't end when I walked out of Monroe's lab. It didn't end when the study was over and the results were buried under institutional politics. No, the experiment really began the moment I accepted that I could control what I believed. The moment I realized that I didn't have to be defined by the stories of my past. So many people, including myself, had lived with the belief that life happened to us. That we were just reacting to circumstances. But once you realize that you can rewrite the story, it's like stepping into a new reality. You start to see that the path forward is yours to create. The idea of rewriting your belief isn't about denying what's happened or pretending things were different. It's about creating new meaning from what you've already experienced. It's about choosing how to see your story and using that lens to navigate the world. The truth is, we all carry burdens. We all carry stories that make us feel smaller, more fragile, more limited than we actually are. I carried mine for so long that I didn't know what was mine and what I had borrowed from others. But I also learned that your past doesn't define your future unless you let it. You can't erase what happened, but you can choose the story you tell about it. And the more I reflected on my journey, from the experiment to everything that followed, the clearer it became. The simple idea that beliefs are not static, that they are living things, was the real breakthrough. The real magic wasn't in changing my external circumstances or waiting for some grand moment of enlightenment. It was in learning how to work with the beliefs I held, how to use them as tools for change rather than chains that kept me anchored to the past. The world is full of noise. It's full of other people's opinions, judgments, and advice. But at some point, you realize that the most important voice you can listen to is your own. And when you learn to listen to yourself, without all the noise and conditioning and limiting beliefs, it's like discovering a whole new language. Now, when life hits me with a setback, when the world tries to throw me off balance, I don't panic the way I used to. I don't fall apart and assume the worst. Instead, I step back, take a breath, and remember what I've learned. I can choose how I respond. I can choose what I believe. And that's been the most powerful shift of all. Not just in my own life, but in the lives of the people I've touched along the way. Samira's yoga studio has grown. She's teaching people to move with intention, not just physically but emotionally. Craig's podcast is growing its audience, and Lucy is on the verge of publishing her first paper on the power of belief in healing. It's not just an experiment anymore, it's a movement. A quiet revolution happening one belief at a time. I've even started coaching a few friends on belief work. They didn't sign up for an academic study, but they've embraced the principles I learned. I share the tools, the practices, the journaling techniques. But the most powerful thing I offer them is the one thing I got from the study: permission. Permission to believe in their own potential. Permission to trust that they have the power to create their own reality. Because the truth is, we've all been given the same tool. The question is, are you using it? Are you willing to challenge the beliefs that limit you? Are you willing to rewrite the stories that hold you back? I don't have all the answers, and I never will. But I do know this: when you begin to believe in yourself, really believe, not just repeat affirmations like a robot, your body starts to believe it too. And once your mind and body are in alignment, you become unstoppable. That's the real experiment. That's where the magic is. You don't need anyone else to tell you it's possible. You just need to believe it for yourself. And that, my friend, is where the real transformation begins. It's odd, isn't it? How we often think of transformation as something big and dramatic. Something that shakes us to our core, like a lightning bolt or a sudden epiphany. But in reality, true transformation is often quiet. It's subtle. It's like watching a seed slowly push through the soil, barely noticeable at first. But over time it grows. It takes root. And one day, you look up and realize that everything has changed. That's what it feels like, this whole journey. At first, it was just about me, my beliefs, my thoughts, my internal changes. But now, I see it in the people around me. People who never heard of Monroe, never went to the lab, but whose stories have started to shift because of something I said or did. Because of something I believed. I've started to understand that it's not enough to change for yourself. That's part of it. But the real power comes from how your belief changes the world around you. The ripple effect. The subtle, quiet influence you have when you choose to believe differently. It's in the way you show up for someone who's struggling. It's in the kindness you extend without expecting anything in return. It's in the patience you offer yourself on the days when you don't feel like you're enough. It's in the calm you bring when the world feels chaotic. And it's not just about big acts of heroism or profound moments of enlightenment. It's about the little things. It's the way you choose to pause before reacting. To breathe. To ask yourself, What do I believe about this situation? And when you stop to ask that question, what do I believe? It's like opening a door you didn't even know was there. It opens up new possibilities. It opens up space to rewrite the story. It's been months since I first started rewriting my own beliefs. Since I first stepped into that lab, uncertain but willing to believe that I could change. Since I realized that what I believed didn't have to be the end of the story, it could be the beginning. And now, as I look back, I see how far I've come. But more importantly, I see how much farther I can go. The work isn't over. I'm still learning. Still questioning. Still rewriting. And now, I pass that torch to you. You might be sitting here reading this, thinking, I don't know if I can change. I've been carrying these beliefs for too long. They've been with me for as long as I can remember. How can I just let them go? The answer is simple. You don't let them go all at once. You don't need to. You just start by noticing them. You start by questioning them. You start by asking, is this story still serving me? And if it's not, you start writing a new one. One small change at a time. That's how the world changes, you know? Not with a single act of defiance or revolution, but with small acts of personal rebellion. With choosing to believe something different. Choosing to see yourself differently. Choosing to let go of the things that weigh you down and embrace the possibility of who you could be. For me, it all started with one belief. Peace is native to me, not earned. That belief didn't just change my mindset. It changed my entire approach to life. It shifted the way I handled stress, the way I dealt with conflict, the way I responded to challenges. I realized that peace wasn't something I had to earn through achievement or through constantly proving myself. It was already inside me. And all I had to do was acknowledge it. That one belief opened the door. And since then, I've walked through it, step by step. Every time I encounter a new belief, I ask myself, does this belief serve me? Does it align with who I want to be? And if it doesn't, I rewrite it. I create a new story. A story that empowers me instead of holding me back. Now, I'm not saying I'm perfect. I'm not saying that life doesn't still throw its punches. It does. It always will. But what I've learned is this: when you're clear on what you believe, when you choose to believe in your own power and potential, those punches don't knock you down. They might push you back a step or two, but they won't knock you out. That's the real magic. That's the real power. Belief isn't some abstract concept. It's a living, breathing force that shapes everything in your life. And when you start to consciously choose what you believe, when you start to intentionally rewrite your story, you realize that you have more control than you've ever imagined. Life is full of uncertainty. Full of chaos and challenges and things beyond your control. But how you respond to those things? That's all you. That's the power of belief. And that, my friend, is how you change your life. One belief at a time. If I've learned anything from this whole journey, it's that change is a constant, just not always in the ways we expect. We think we're looking for some big, obvious shift. A lightning strike of transformation. But instead, it's often the small moments that build up, unnoticed, like droplets of water shaping a rock over time. And just like that, your beliefs change. Subtly, quietly, but powerfully. A few weeks ago, I found myself at a crossroads again. Something had shifted at work. A new manager, new expectations, a looming deadline that was beginning to feel overwhelming. The old me would have gone into panic mode, running in circles, overwhelmed by the pressure, convinced that I wasn't capable of handling it. But the new me? The one who had spent months rewriting her beliefs? I found myself sitting at my desk, surrounded by the usual chaos, but instead of reacting with anxiety, I paused. And in that pause, I heard the familiar words, like an echo, peace is native to me, not earned. I didn't rush. I didn't freak out. I took a deep breath and allowed myself to remember that I get to choose how I respond. I chose to tackle the project step by step, without worrying about the outcome. I chose to trust that, no matter what happened, I was enough. In the past, I would have measured my worth by how well I performed or how quickly I could fix everything. But now, I saw the work as just that, work. Not a reflection of my identity. Not a measure of my value. Just something I could approach with clarity and calm. And that's when the magic happened. The project didn't just get done, it got done well. Not perfectly, but in a way that felt sustainable and true to who I was. The old belief that I needed to hustle nonstop to prove myself was gone. And in its place was a new belief: I am enough as I am. I can do hard things without losing myself. The beauty of belief work is that you're never really done. The more you dive into it, the more you realize how deeply ingrained your old beliefs are. But the key is not to get frustrated or discouraged. It's to stay curious. To continue questioning and evolving. The work is ongoing, and that's what makes it both challenging and empowering. But even on the hard days, the belief that I can choose how I respond has been my anchor. No matter how much chaos the world throws my way, I remember that peace is native to me. It's already within me. I don't have to earn it or chase it. I just have to choose it. And that's what I've learned from all of this: the power of choice. You don't have to wait for the perfect moment, or for everything to align. You can choose to believe in your own power, in your own peace, right now. That doesn't mean things will always be easy. Life still happens. People still disappoint you. But when you choose to align with beliefs that empower you, you find yourself navigating life differently. You don't let every challenge define you. You redefine what it means to face a challenge. I used to think that peace was something you could only get when everything was perfect. When the conditions were just right. But now I know, peace is something you create. It's something you choose, even in the midst of chaos. So I guess the real question is, what do you believe? Because the moment you recognize that you have the power to shape your beliefs, to rewrite the stories that no longer serve you, everything changes. You realize that you've been holding the pen all along. It's not about waiting for permission from the world. It's about giving yourself permission to believe that you are enough. That you are worthy of peace. That you are capable of creating the life you desire. And when you believe that, when you really believe that, nothing can stop you. Because your beliefs shape your reality. And once you change your beliefs, you change everything. It all starts with you. With what you choose to believe. With the story you decide to tell yourself. And that story? It's yours to write. I've had some time to reflect on everything. On the experiment, on the beliefs I've rewritten, on how my life has changed since that first day I walked into Moreau's lab. And it's strange, but in a way, I almost feel like I've come full circle. The person I am now isn't drastically different from who I was before. I'm still me, with the same quirks, the same flaws, the same dreams. But there's a peace within me now that wasn't there before. A stillness that wasn't just a fleeting moment, it's become part of who I am. And maybe that's the most profound thing I've learned from this entire journey. Change doesn't always have to be dramatic. It doesn't have to be a full transformation where everything about your life flips upside down. Sometimes, change is quieter. It's subtle, like a slow fade into a brighter, more focused version of yourself. You might not even notice it at first. But one day, you'll wake up and realize that the things that used to throw you off track don't have the same power over you anymore. I look back at the version of myself who was so tangled up in her beliefs that I couldn't see the forest for the trees. I was constantly fighting against the current, constantly struggling to prove my worth, constantly rushing to get somewhere. But now, I see that everything I ever needed was always within me. It wasn't about doing more. It was about slowing down, getting quiet, and remembering that peace was already mine to claim. But even though I've come far, I know I'm not done. The work is never really finished. There will always be more beliefs to rewrite, more stories to challenge. And that's okay. Because this is the journey. This is the process. Every day is a chance to choose what you believe about yourself. Every day is an opportunity to question the old beliefs, the ones that don't serve you anymore. Every day is a chance to move forward with a little more clarity, a little more confidence, a little more peace. It's funny, isn't it? How we spend so much of our lives looking for answers, thinking that we have to figure everything out. But the more I learn, the more I realize that the answers are already within us. We just need to stop, listen, and choose to believe in our own power. It's not about waiting for the perfect moment. It's not about waiting for the right circumstances to fall into place. It's about choosing, in the moment, to believe that you are worthy, that you are enough, and that you have everything you need to create the life you desire. So, the next time life throws a curveball, or when you find yourself standing at a crossroads, ask yourself, what do I believe? And remember that you don't have to carry the old beliefs that have held you back. You have the power to choose a new story. A story that serves you. A story that empowers you. And when you start living from that place of belief, when you start aligning your thoughts, your actions, and your words with the truth that you are enough, that you are capable, and that peace is already yours, it's amazing what happens. The world starts to shift. It starts to feel different. You start to feel different. Because once you realize the power of belief, once you understand that you can create your own reality by choosing your thoughts, everything begins to change. But the best part is knowing that this journey isn't over. There will always be more to discover. There will always be more beliefs to rewrite, more stories to tell. But I'm ready for it. Because now I know that I am the one who gets to decide what happens next. And if I can rewrite my story, so can you. So go ahead. Write the next chapter of your life. Choose your beliefs. Choose your story. Because the only thing standing between you and the life you desire is the story you've been telling yourself. And you have the power to change it.